So, where stands the Executive's programme for government and investment strategy in this chilly new economic climate? Can they still live up to their promise of creating jobs and reducing poverty? Economist Mike Smyth is here. You're very welcome. It is a remarkable turnaround in terms of the economic climate since those documents, the programme for government investment strategy, were written. Recognition today from Nigel Dawes that things are going to get tougher. Can they keep to their promises?
Well, it's difficult this year for sure. And I mean, apart from the litany of things that he mentioned about the effect on property prices and asset sales, you have the issue about back pay for civil servants and other things like that. So it is going to be very difficult. I know, for example, that some departments are running out of money. It's coming up to year end anyway, but normally you would see departments having a surplus of money this time. It's quite a few of them are cash strapped. I'm slightly slightly less pessimistic than the Minister about next year. I mean, for example, I listened to what he had to say. I wonder what kind of inflation assumptions they're making about 09-10 and 10-11 figures. So the expectation is that inflation may go to zero, may even go negative this year, and that would have the effect of increasing the spending power of the existing budgets and offsetting some of these other windfall losses resulting from the...
Because there wouldn't be any adjustment, they would maintain, they would still get the same block grant, but it would just go a bit further.
It'll go considerably further. So therefore, I mean, their biggest expenditure is on wages and salaries. Most departments and their AME. I think the wider issue here is, as the assumptions that were made when the programme for government was written have changed, I don't see a similar. Maybe he's preparing the ground now for a significant change in the priorities within that budget. For example, many of the people I speak to are slightly perplexed that there hasn't been much more rapid movement towards reallocating resources towards social housing, for example. If construction sector, house building sector is so badly strapped, well, that's something that the Executive can do relatively quickly. And there are other things that they can do. If it's employment creation that we're after, it very much depends on what their view is, and ultimately it depends on how flexible ministers are going to be with their budgets.
At the time of the programme for government and then the subsequent US investment conference, all the talk was that we were too dependent on the public sector, we should be slimming that down and we should be expanding this entrepreneurial private sector. But now it looks like it's going to be very tough times for people in the private sector because of global economic conditions. So have they got to rethink that basic argument?
Well, I think it's forced upon them. I mean, there is a question mark, Mark, about just how much discretion has a small regional assembly like Northern Ireland got in these kinds of huge, in this global crisis. I think on the wider issue that you're raising, there is an argument for saying that as has happened in the Republic, for example, where government ministers are foregoing pay increases and they're trying to enforce a public sector pay freeze, whether there should be an equivalent sacrifice or effort made within the public sector to match the kind of difficulties in the private sector. That's a debate I would like to see taking place. But right now, I think there's plenty of ideas around. The business community has been banging on about things that could be done to improve cash flow for businesses. There's much more that the banks can do. We all know that. And I think government needs to sort of coordinate and start to articulate some kind of a clearer view as to what it's going to do to try and help.
When people talk about the size of the public sector here and the civil service and so on, sometimes there's been an argument that you need to start slashing jobs there in order to free up talent for the private sector. But in an economy where there aren't jobs in the private sector, is it better simply to keep people employed? Is that all this regional assembly can do? Well,
I think our vision to create, I'm on the record as the old St Augustine. Lord, make me virtuous, but not yet. We aspire to be like the Celtic Tiger was. We aspire to have an economy like the southeast of England and so on. And we mustn't lose sight of that, because in the longer term that is going to increase prosperity here and give opportunity here. Right now, I think, given the severity of the maelstrom that's wreaking havoc in the world economy, I would be reluctant to go for radical change now. I think we need to manage this situation, get through it, and be in a better position to implement the kinds of radical reforms that you're talking about when the situation is more normal.
What's your view on the general world situation at the moment? Do you think this trough is going to be 2 years? Have you got any notion of how long we're going to be in for it? I know that's asking you to look into a crystal ball, but everybody's trying to do it at the moment.
Well, I think, again, we would have been in trouble anyway with our housing market collapsing and the knock-on effect. We would have had a domestic recession anyway, probably, or very, very slow growth. The credit crunch is the key to this. And what we see is, and I will answer your question, what we see is government struggling to try and patch and repair and get something like normal bank lending going. And each time they try to do that, something else comes along and postpones it. My own view is that I think in the UK we will see nationalisation of the banking system in the middle of this year. Inflation will be zero. Interest rates will be close to zero. The Bank of England will then start what economists call quantitative easing, which is effectively writing cheques.
Printing money.
It's a kind of printing of money. It's not the printing presses don't actually roll, but it creates credit. It creates facility for credit. And if that doesn't work, and I'll postpone my definitive judgment to mid-year, if that doesn't start to work, then we are in a depression.